We are in the middle of a relationship series, a series on the fact that God has created us a certain way to be in union and relationship and friendship and marriage and singleness all together, and that we do that with a purpose that will glorify Him and bring us joy and satisfaction. We are relational by creation, by design, and God has placed us in community so that we can live out those relationships, so that we can grow, so that we can find joy, and so that we can glorify Him in the way that we approach those relationships. Now, we've been talking for several weeks about what are the building materials for building a godly marriage or relationship or friendship or coworkers or dating relationship. And those building blocks are the fact that God has a purpose for relationships, purpose for singleness, purpose for marriage. He has a purpose for having us in a relationship. He has agape love that we're supposed to live out in all relationships, loving our enemies, loving our neighbors, loving our families with a sacrificing kind of love. That's really what He designs us to do. And really, if the building foundations of having Christ in the middle of all of our relationships, having an agape love that He has modeled that we're supposed to live out, we have the foundation, we have the materials to build godly, effective, joyful relationships. What we need to do now and for the next couple of weeks is we need to really fill up our toolbox. So I have this morning our relationship toolbox that we're going to be looking at the next couple of weeks. How can we build godly, effective relationships, whether it's a friendship, a dating relationship, a coworker, or a marriage? What are some tools that we can have in our relationship toolbox that will help us construct that godly relationship? So if you have your Bibles, open them up to James chapter 3, and we're going to look at what Scripture says about what one of the first tool that we're going to talk about. James chapter 3, starting with verse 2. It says, "For we all stumble in many ways." Amen, right there. We can just finish. Sorry, James nails it right there. Every one of us stumbles. If you're visiting with us this morning and you think that this is just a place of perfection, this isn't a country club for saints. This is a hospital for sinners. We all stumble in many ways. Start off right there. And that carries over into our relationships. So first of all, what we saw in the video was true. It takes work. And so because we stumble in many ways, let's look at one way that we can use to build relationships. If anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, a mature man. That word perfect right there means developing, growing, and mature. Able to bridle the whole body as well. Now, if we put bits into the horse's mouth so that they will obey us, we direct the entire body as well. Look at the ships also. They, though they are so great and are driven by strong winds, are still directed by a very small rudder, wherever the inclination of the pilot desires. So also the tongue is a small part of the body, and yet it boasts of great things. See how great a forest is set aflame by a small fire. When we look at what James is saying, he says there is a communication tool that is important to every one of us, and the first communication, or the first tool that we want to look at is communication. Not necessarily what you have in your toolbox, although this is a great tape measure now, and also you can YouTube anything, so you can watch how to build. But when we think about the first tool that we have in our relationships toolbox, we have communication. In fact, when I talk to couples all the time, I say that if you will focus your marriage or your lives on Christ and effective communication, then you will build a solid relationship. That is true in every relationship you're in. If you center it on Christ and you practice not communication, but quality, effective communication, then you will build a joyful, meaningful, growing, mature relationship. But it requires Christ and communication. Communication is a tool in all relationships. First thing that you need to understand is the first tool that we're going to pull out of our relationships toolbox is communication. Now, when you have tools, there are certain tools that have specific purposes. In fact, there are some tools that are only meant for destruction. I have a 5-foot wrecking bar that I use, but I also have this sledgehammer right here that has been used, okay? And it's used for destruction. It's used for the demolition process, to tear things down. When I'm trying to construct, I don't say, honey, bring me my sledgehammer because I've got this little nail that I want to tack up and we're going to hang a picture. Okay, that's ridiculous. I've never used this for construction purposes, only destruction purposes. The tongue can be destructive. There are tools out there in relationships that if you allow them in, dishonesty, distrust, those are all tools that do nothing but destroy and demolish what you're trying to build. Communication isn't simply destruction. There's also tools out there that are only meant for construction. They only build up. I was thinking there's a couple of them out there, but this is my finish nailer. This finish nailer is only used to build things. It's not time to remove the countertops or remove the wall and say, hey, bring me my finish nailer. I'm gonna knock down this wall. Now, there is some crazy guy out there that will correct me at the end of this sermon and say, you know what, Pastor, one time, I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about everybody else who thinks about when they're building and appreciates their tools. This is only used to build, okay? Agape love is used to build. The problem with communication, what James tells us, is the tongue is more like a hammer. Now, this hammer, well used, is used to not only demolish, but also to construct. It can be used both ways, for the building up or the tearing down. I can, with this, build a wall, and with the same hammer, I can destroy a wall. And that's what James says. You've got to be cautious with the tool of communication, because with the same tongue, you can construct and build up and encourage, and with the same tongue, you can absolutely destroy. And I think that that's so vitally important to all relationships, whether it's a parent-child relationship, or whether it's a marriage, or whether it's a friendship, or even in your working environment. When you build with your tongue, you can enforce and you can encourage a relationship. But when you destroy with your tongue, you can be destructive in everything that you say. Look at what Proverbs 15:1 says. Great depiction of how this works. It says, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. It has the ability to build up, and it has the ability to destroy. And when you get into a heated discussion, when you get into a frustrating time, when you get into a disagreement in a relationship, just know that your tongue has the ability to build up, to diffuse the situation, to pour agape love on the situation, or your tongue has the ability to set an entire forest on fire. Proverbs 18 says this, 18:21, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. And then as a father and as someone who boasts of my gift being sarcasm, I love Ephesians 6:4 says, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Do not exasperate, do not encourage their frustration. How do I do that? How do I provoke my sons? Usually through sarcasm, usually through a bitter word, usually through a harsh comment, in an opportunity where I could build up and encourage. Instead, I break down and tear down and provoke. James tells us the tongue is like a fire. Fire is a good thing. It can be used to bring warmth and bring security and safety. It can be used to cook, but just the smallest of a spark can set an entire forest on fire. Our communication is a tool that was given to us by God to encourage and to construct and to build up our relationships, not to destroy them. Communication is a key tool if you're gonna grow and mature in your relationships. Now, I've said effective, quality communication. talking is not communication. The second thing that we need to understand is communication is a two-way street. Communication is a two-way street. Communication involves 50% talking and 50% what? Listening. Okay, listening isn't even as important as understanding. I would say effective quality communication doesn't happen unless the person has an understanding of what's being said. You can say something, and if they don't hear it and understand it the way that you present it, you're not communicating. Communication is a two-way street. Look at what James tells us in chapter 1, verse 19. But everyone, by the way, everyone in the Greek means you and me, everyone. Everyone must be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. Slow to speak, slow to anger. The biology lesson of the day is God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. Be slow to speak and quick to listen and quick to understand. Howard Hendricks says that effective quality communication is when the speaker is more worried about understanding the listener instead of the speaker just trying to be understood. Here's another way of saying it. Winning the argument isn't as important as communicating effectively and clearly. Me understanding resolution and understanding what Tiffany is thinking and feeling is more important than me winning the argument. Communication is a two-way street. We must talk and we must listen. Now, that's really two different lessons. Men, sometimes you need the encouragement to be quick to speak because our words aren't quite as quantity as some of the ladies in the room. Not just generalities, all right? I'm just speaking to all of us. But it's average that a man speaks about 10 to 15,000 words a day and a woman 30 to 35,000 a day. A lot of times, men, you use those up at work and you come home, how was your day? Good, right? Have you ever gotten one of those ladies? And then you reciprocate by saying, and how was yours? And I'm just giving a general example, not at all my wife sitting over there watching. You know, how was yours? Oh, it was good. You know, at 8:30 I called so-and-so, and at 9 o'clock I met so-and-so. And you know what the barista said? And then I got, and that stop sign down there was, I'm like, wow, I think the day was quicker than the recap, right? Quick, some of y'all took you a second to get that. We need to communicate, and a communication is a two-way street. So men, that means sometimes you speak a little more than you feel like it, but you listen to understand. You approach communication, quality, effective communication. Quality, effective communication comes with understanding. It comes when we are slow to speak and quick to listen and slow to speak and quick to hear and slow to become angry. We need to listen more than we speak. We need to seek to understand before we seek to be understood. And the quality communication doesn't mean quantity of communication. Tiffany is the oldest of 5 girls. We recently, when I say we, I mean they, recently planned a surprise party for my in-laws for their anniversary. There was a quantity of communication happening between the 5 girls. There was a quantity of them sharing opinions and ideas, but the quality wasn't there because no one was understanding and hearing and doing. It has to be not simply the amount of words, but the quality of when you go to the table, am I seeking to understand everyone else? In a friendship, there has to be understanding of what each person wants. In a working relationship, there has to be an understanding of what your boss or your employees are communicating and what he or she wants. Without that, without understanding, communication is just noise. It's just a bunch of talking with nothing being done. Communication is a two-way street, and it involves, yes, speaking, but a lot of listening and a whole lot of understanding if it's going to be effective. Now, the third thing about communication as this tool in our relationship toolbox is it's a challenge. It's a challenge really for two different ways. Two ways, one is biblical, one is cultural. Genesis chapter 5 says this, verse 2, he created them male and female. And he blessed them and named them man in the day they were created. We were created differently. Men and women communicate differently. We speak differently, we hear differently, we approach things differently. Men, we need to understand this. You need to study the ladies in your life, whether it's a daughter, a wife, a friend, and understand that the way that we communicate to them is different. I think this is depicted in this video that we're gonna watch. This couple try to understand what she wants and what he wants and experience and celebrate the differences between him making us male and female. Watch this video.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's gonna stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever gonna stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
Yeah, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like, there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. Ow. If you would just...
Don't...
Try to see things my way.
Our culture is trying to erase the dividing line that God created because he made us male and female. Instead of celebrating and sometimes laughing at the difference, men, we want to fix things, don't we? And women, sometimes you just want them to listen. We're different. When the way that we approach, the way that we hear, the way that we understand are different. There is going to be a challenge between a male and a female communicating effectively and with great quality. But it's worth it. It's worth working. And there are some times where I have to say, Tiffany, is this something you want me to solve or you just want me to listen? And I can listen. And there are other times where she says, no, I need a solution and we can work together and help. And there are other times where she says, I need more out of you. I need more details. And I'll dig deep, even though sometimes I don't feel like it, and give her details about what's going on or about a phone conversation that I had. She is amazed that I can talk to someone for 7 minutes and hang up, and she says, what did they have to say? Not much. So I just started putting them on speaker so she could hear it, right? No. There is a difference between male and female, so that when you have friendships of the opposite gender or when you are dating, you've got to understand and seek to understand what the other person wants. And when you get married, it is work, because it requires our effort to properly, to effectively communicate with others, because you cannot have a relationship that grows and develops and matures without quality, effective communication. That's the first obstacle. That's why it's difficult. That's the biblical. The second one is a cultural. The second one is the fact that our number one form of communication in the last 15 years is this thing. We get text on it, we get calls on it, we tweet on it, we snap on it, we check YouTube. Everything that we do, our number one source of communication is this. The problem is, Dr. Albert Meridian did this study, and it's his rule. It says right here that only 7% of proper, effective communication is the spoken word. 38% is voice and tone. 55% is body language. And when all we do is text, and when we try to build relationships, friendships, work, whatever relationship on text alone, we're leaving 93% of effective communication on the table, and we're relying on just a few texts or words. That's frustrating. And the reason that we see relationships in decline, the reason that we see people with more friends and more connectivity than ever before in human history, but we see depression at the highest rate in the history of mankind, is because we are not effectively growing relationships with quality, effective communication. Why? Because we need voice and tone to help understand, oh boy, we're having spaghetti again, or oh boy, we're having spaghetti again. That matters. And through a text, all of a sudden frustration arises. There is a barrier between communication because there is no understanding and there is no quality, effective communication. Without the body language of the joy or the frustration being shown in your body language, then you can't effectively communicate. And when our primary source of communication is a smartphone, we are not developing quality, effective communication in our relationships. It's not a tool that we're using to the best of our ability. In fact, I would say it's a tool, it's a hammer that we're using to tear down walls instead of build. And so when we think about where we're going to go with our communication, when we think about building godly, satisfying, joyful relationships, we have to understand, is God calling us to bridle our tongues, to train our tongues, to utilize our tongues to build beautiful, effective relationships, to develop those friendships into relationships that will honor God and bring joy to our lives? Or are we using our tongues to set forests on fire, to destroy and break down walls? Communication is a tool that can be used to destroy or to build something beautiful and effective and something that will bring you joy and satisfaction. You were created for relationships. I was created to not be a maverick or a solo. I was created to walk in a sense of community, to live in a family and to grow relationships. But communication is one of those tools that has to continue to be sharpened, to continue to be used, continue to be developed so that we will grow quality, effective, meaningful communication in our relationships. That is the key. And James tells us, if we do that, if we train our tongues, if we can tame our tongues, then we can use that to honor God and to pour into others and to love others with that agape, self-sacrificing type of love. And when we do that, you'll see your relationships, you'll see your families, you'll see your friendships flourish, and you will see unbelievable growth in the area of how you can honor God in those relationships. I close with this. God put those people in your life. You think, oh, look at what I have. I have these friendships, and I have this circle of influence, and I have these coworkers, and I have these teammates, and I have these classmates, and I have this spouse or these kids. No, God gave you those. God placed you in that circle of influence. He placed you in that classroom. He placed you on that team. He placed you in that marriage to destroy, to frustrate, or to encourage and to build up and to pour life into others. We have the opportunity to do both. I know that God placed you in that relationship so that you could pour life into, so that you could encourage, so that you can challenge, so that you can build up, so that you can construct love and encouragement to the people around you. And it starts with quality, effective communication. It starts with today making the decision that I'm going to give a gentle answer and turn away the wrath and not a harsh word that's going to stir up anger. That I'm going to be slow to speak and quick to listen. That I'm going to build up and edify those with the words that I give. That I'm going to make sure that my primary source isn't texting, but it's sitting face to face, watching people, communicating with people, maybe at the dinner table, maybe on the couch, maybe with the TV off, maybe with the phones far from you. Crazy stuff in our culture, but it's effective, and it'll lead to quality communication, which will lead to joyful and satisfying relationships that will honor God and will bring you satisfaction. That's what God's called us to. There are several tools in that toolbox that we'll use to build relationships, but it starts with quality, effective communication.